I'll entertain a motion. Ms. Hanson?
Say her name. I move that we approve Dr. Marcella Baez as the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources.
Second.
All in favor? 5.
Congratulations,
Are
Dr.
you here?
Baez.
Oh, she's here.
I was wondering if that was a reporter or what.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're being recorded, so you have to speak into the mic.
Hello, I'm Marcella Baez. Thank you for having me here today. It's a privilege to join a team of professionals that truly has the lives of their children that is the priority. Everything I've seen, what I hear, what I read, there's a true commitment, and they care deeply. You all care deeply. We will care deeply for all of our young people. So thank you. It's an honor to serve Superintendent Cardona, his leadership team. I'm here to work hard and be a part of the team. Es un privilegio servir este distrito, a donde realmente las vidas de los jóvenes es la prioridad de todo. Es muy importante para mí, para mi trabajo, de estar en un lugar a donde realmente eso es la prioridad. So it's all about the kids. That's why we do what we do. Thank you for having me.
Who do you have
Welcome
with
aboard, and we're glad to have you.
Marcy, who's with you, Marcy?
Welcome.
Sabrina lives in, she just moved from Austin to Georgetown.
you? Oh, wonderful.
Her mom has to go back to Houston. I don't want to take over, but any insight on what I'm hoping to live here in the district? So
Wonderful.
insight on where I should
I will. I'll get a stable of realtors knocking down the door.
I'm a hugger. Thank you very much. Thank you. Marcia. This is Nicole. Thank you. And I love you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We'll get you information so you can move, so the transfer can be easy.
Here, I have some floor plans to trade.
That's Monica. Okay, thank you. We can now start our agenda prep portion of our agenda.
So, Madam President, members of the board, thank you. I'm going to try and do this a little different because I know we're really here for Senate Bill 1566 training. So the agenda for June 18th is in front of you. If you would just take a few minutes to just look over any of the items, and if you have any questions of us, we can answer those, but looking forward to moving on to our Senate Bill 1566 training. We also provided for you some preliminary 2018 SMCISD EOC 5th and 8th grade scores. It's a separate packet if you want those for your reading pleasure.
I do. Ms. Hanson?
Yes, I was just wanting a little bit more information about item 7A. What, got Mr. Cruz coming to speak about elections?
We had a trustee who had requested the potential of looking at November elections, and so that's what he's coming
That's what I
for.
thought, but I wanted
Yes.
to make sure. Okay.
That was Mr. McLaughlin's item.
And remember on item B, we moved core commitment number 5, which is community engagement.
From May.
From May to this. Ms. Ruiz Mills will do an academic update, but also include a shack update, because there was some questions from last, so she's got an update from the committee.
Madam President,
Yes, Mr. Arredondo?
in regards to our update for Mr. Cruz, is it possible if we can invite, and I obviously would like input from my colleagues on the dais, in regards to the legal counsel of the party that we entered into agreement with in regards to single member districts? I guess my concern or my rationale behind that request in inviting their legal counsel is in previous conversations, there's been comments made from the dais that, you know, there's an agreement made and this other party needs to be a part of this conversation. And obviously I want them to be a part of this conversation from the very beginning. And so I'd like to reach out to them and contact them that we're having this conversation versus kind of the rhetoric that's happened in the past of we're trying to do this in secret or without their permission or without them knowing. So I think inviting them to attend as we start this process and conversation, and then if there's anything that comes up, we have the legal counsel of the opposite party to speak to the matter versus we speaking in what we think or what we know or what we've heard or what we're assuming. And so, and I think that way we can have a more robust conversation when it comes to November elections and single member districts and things like that.
I did speak to Mr. Cruz last week, and he did say he was gonna reach out to Mr. Rios, Rolando Rios, to have him as a, potentially, so, yeah.
Perfect, thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
And what about our attorneys that were during that lawsuit?
I don't know who those were.
They're listed on the page.
The big, thick packet.
Well, even the small result, just to have them to provide some information if we're gonna talk about, it doesn't have to do with November, it has to do with the districts.
Yes.
So
We can do
you'll
that.
look that up?
Yes, we will reach out to him.
Did you have a question or comment? Ms. Yapondo? Mr. Redondo has given me 2 other items that he would like to add. Discussion action to establish committee to receive nominations and make recommendations for the renaming of the San Marcos CISD facilities. And a second agenda item. Did you mean these for this month or for next month?
Whatever, I guess, is
We can
the
work 'em
preference
into-
of the board. Obviously, they're submitted today, so they can go on this month, but I wanted us to have the conversation from the dais to see what everyone's preference was.
And the second item was discussion, action related to former Central Administration Building located at 501 South LBJ Drive and adjacent facilities. Any questions or comments about adding that?
Do
we
we
wanna-
know what buildings we're looking at renaming, or?
I mean, and I think that was per our previous conversations when we were talking about renaming was having that conversation, and if we appointed a committee to have that dialogue and discussion, it'd essentially be any facility that's currently named, minus Rodriguez Elementary School that we just took action on. I don't see us having a conversation about all of those, but I didn't want to list specific campuses and then the conversation be, well, why did you leave these off, or why didn't you put these on? And so I kind of left it vague because I thought from the dais we can have that conversation as far as appointing a committee and then having that citizen-driven process make that even initial recommendation of these are the elementary school campuses that we, or facilities that we deem appropriate to rename or have a conversation about renaming. So I wanted to leave it broad and empower the committee to kind of have that conversation with the community versus
I think we need to
us
give the
prescribing.
committee a direction towards what we're, not just say, look at all the campuses and think about renaming them. I think we need to give the committee direction so that they know where they're supposed to go.
So we could have that conversation at our Monday meeting, and then whatever that motion was or whatever that conversation be, I'd be comfortable narrowing it down to specific campuses. I just wanted to leave it vague now, and so we could have this conversation and dialogue and move into the agenda with that information with everybody.
Ms. Costilla?
We're talking about naming a committee, and the board has not had any dialogue whether they want to rename facilities. So I'm assuming we have to have that
first.
discussion before we can even decide about what we're gonna have. We're gonna name a committee or whatever.
I think my agenda item was discussion and
Yes,
action.
it says
so I
discussion
assumed-
/ action to establish a committee.
But it says
receive
to
nom-
establish a committee, not, I mean, we're already talking about a committee when we haven't decided whether we're gonna name them,
Whether we
rename them
want
or
to.
not.
Well, I mean,
Whether we
I'm
need to.
assuming if we have the discussion and a motion is made and it fails or it passes, then obviously I think that's the discussion that you're referring to as taking place before we establish a committee.
It would be a discussion item. The question remains, do we want to try this for June, or do we want to move that to July?
I
Are
think
y'all, are y'all,
I'd rather than committee
I'm sorry?
discussion go in July. Just, is July less full, or?
July is less full in terms of, with the 2 budget meetings, workshops that we have to do.
Do we
be okay?
Schedules?
I'm
Those
comfortable postponing it or delaying it until July, if that's the preference of the board, but I'd like the language to stay discussion and action.
Yes,
And if the
That's
board
what it says,
chooses to take
discussion.
action,
yeah. Ms. Costilla?
What was the second item regarding the,
The second one, the first one was on that naming, okay, and the second one was discussion action related to former central administration building located at 501 South LBJ and adjacent facilities. Project cost for demolition of building and, I'm trouble reading your name,
Yeah, so, I mean, just to kind of not rephrase this, but restate it, so it's discussion action related to the former central administration building located at 501 South LBJ Drive and adjacent facilities. And I've requested that staff provide us the projected cost for the demolition of the current central administration building and the removal of the school's maintained portables. Information regarding the subdividing of the lot, that's 501 South LBJ Drive. And then the third is, per our conversations when we talked about the relocation of central office, I'd like the new information that I guess some of the trustees are aware of when it comes to the donation of property or real estate to an educational entity or nonprofit. And just some background on why I've agendized this. Obviously, we've taken action on the front end of relocating our central administration building, but I know just kind of anecdotally that that playground facility has sat there dilapidated for the better part of the last decade. And I really would like us as a board to kind of talk about maintaining that in some way or demolishing it so it isn't a safety hazard for that neighborhood. And then even just a more robust conversation of what we're going to do with that property at 501 South LBJ, because I know from conversations here on the dais, we've talked about how we have no intention of putting staff back in there, at least in its current form and state. So if we have no intention of returning to that building in the foreseeable future, I don't see why it needs to stay and further dilapidate. But again, I don't know where that conversation is going to go, so I'd like us to have that conversation as a board and see what the consensus is or the feeling of the trustees is, and have some information to have that conversation in a more elaborate way.
so this, how is this impacting Central? They have a 25-year lease. Are we talking about, the discussion will be on selling the rest of the property and leaving that 25, I'm not even sure how big the property is there that where Central is located. So I'm trying to understand, because the question has been posed to me by those individuals, and I've told them, I said, I think we've had enough on our plate for the school board that,
I'm okay to demolish anything, though. Let whoever buys
other
it
issues and
gets
more
it.
important items, and at this point, then focusing on what we're gonna do on that property. But if we are, then we need to notify them that we are having discussions, and what will the discussion entail?
They
Selling
might
the
want to
property?
be present, they might want to be present
Yes.
for those discussions.
Well, and again, and I think, excuse me, Ms. Cantu, and I think the supplemental information I requested was exactly for us to have those conversations. I know, again, Mrs. Castilla, during the conversation of the central administration relocation vote, I think an original motion had been made by one of my colleagues to donate that facility. And it was my understanding several years ago when we had that conversation that we were legally not allowed to do that. So that's why I've kind of included that informational request in there, because I'd like that new information or those new legal parameters or requirements that would allow us to do that if that were the case. But again, without adding too much specificity to the agenda item, again, I wanted it to be a conversation amongst all of the trustees, so I didn't want to be too specific, as I don't think this is, a vote. I don't see how this conversation is going to go, but I think we need to have it. Again, just the one thing that really kind of concerns me is that playground, that parkland, or whatever you want to call it, has sat there dilapidated since, I think, even Dr. Schaefer was superintendent of schools. So it's been there a while, and I want us to have a conversation about either maintaining our facilities or getting rid of them. Because if we're not going to maintain them, there's no reason for us to hold on to them, especially when they're right across the street from people's houses.
I don't want to pay you to demolish though.
Ms. Villapanto, did you want to weigh in? No. Ms. Hanson?
I just said, I don't want to pay any money to demolish. Let whoever buys or gets it be in charge of that, because we don't need to spend our money for somebody else.
And this would be all the discussion some of the discussion we would have when we bring it up in July. So with your permission, we'll put it in July.
Have Karen follow with you.
So both those items, yeah, as long as they stay as discussion and with language for possible action, I'm fine with postponing those till July.
Okay, anything else on the agenda for our regular meeting? Then, do we go ahead and start? I'll need to go ahead and adjourn.
No, it's on.
We just transitioned to.
We just transitioned.
Ready for our Senate bill information.